So my position on this issue is pretty simple. Or my argument is pretty simple. The crux of it is essentially people are should be punished or should suffer the consequences legally for actions that they willingly committed. So essentially, children who were brought into the U.S. by their parents did not willingly come into the country. They were brought here at an age enough, and even sometimes, I would say, even if they were 15 years old, they were still under the guardianship of their parents, and were not left with an option of staying, unless they want to be orphans. And so I feel like the whole reason why children are children and need guardians is because the guardians are supposedly responsible enough to make decisions for them. So it was not up to the children to make this decision in terms of the law. And so these children, some of them coming over when they were just little, are not aware that their parents, or were not aware at the time that their parents were disobeying the law and coming to the country. So these kids were brought to the US, say 2-3 years old, maybe not even aware of who they are or their existence on this planet. And they were raised here, many of them, and some of them don't even know Spanish. And these kids, their lives are here. And now they're obviously, many of them older, some of them not as old, but the ages vary. It's not really important. But essentially, they have their lives in this country. They have no memory of the country that they came from before. And I don't think it's necessarily up to, or not even up to the president, but it's not even in the realm of possibility that they should be faulted for something that they did not do. It's not like they made the decision to come here. The parents did, and they've been raised in this country. Their life is here. Their lives are here. I don't think that there is any reason that they should be sent back, considering that the whole point of that is, to, I guess, reprimand people for their illegal actions. But their illegal actions were not committed by the children. So, I think that in time we'll see if DACA remains DACA and it continues to do what it was intended to do. But for now, I don't think that it was the best decision to threaten to uproot all of these people, from their lives that they've built here.
Okay, thanks for that. Can you hear me, first of all? Okay, awesome. My name is Michael. Nice to meet you. I think this is going to be a good debate. It's kind of funny. Yaz told me that of all the 20 topics we had to pick, we agreed on all of them except for this one, which is great. And so in that same thread and in that same vein, I'm actually going to agree with your entire speech. I totally 100% agree with you that people shouldn't suffer consequences for actions their parents committed. I actually do support dreamers, as they're called. Children of immigrants who came in here illegal should be protected. My position in this debate round, though, is that he was correct and just in repealing Daca for two key reasons. And those reasons are going to be the legal and constitutional aspects of the policy and the ramifications of not having Congress actually pass it and how it's actually worse for dreamers if you don't have it. So the first argument is constitutionality. Now, Daca is actually not law in the United States. It's actually a policy. It was an executive order passed by Barack Obama in 2012 that overrode Congress's ability to actually create law. Now, this is kind of funny, though, because Obama literally admitted that it was unconstitutional. In October 2010, many people on the left and Democrats demanded that he implemented immigration reforms unilaterally or executive. And he said this, quote, "I am not king. I can't do these things by myself." In March 2011, he said that, quote, "With respect to the notion that I can just suspend deportations through executive order, that's not the case. I can't just bypass Congress and change the immigration law myself. That's not how a democracy works." Yet, in 2012, after making both of these remarks, he decided to go against his own principles and against the Constitution of the United States and pass a law, or specifically a policy, Daca, that protected dreamers from being overturned. And this is at a time where Congress specifically didn't have clear laws on what they were supposed to be. Now, this is interesting because his second program, which was DAPA, was actually several states brought forward a lawsuit and sued DAPA, which is different from Daca. It was an expanded protection or executive order under Daca, and actually won the case, and the Supreme Court ruled it was unconstitutional, and it got overturned. Now, 20 legal experts and scholars in a Columbia University and Harvard Law School study said that the same characteristics that made DAPA unconstitutional also apply to DACA. And if states were to bring lawsuits forward, it would be likely overturned. Now, this is a problem for two reasons. The first one is that when Trump became president, 13 different states have threatened to bring lawsuits forward about DACA. And so Trump has two options. He can either let the states sue, in which case it will be struck down as unconstitutional, and then guess what happens to the executive order? It goes away, and we have no legal protections for dreamers. Or he can say we're going to phase it out over a 6-month period and give Congress the opportunity for them to do their job. Trump repealing DACA gave Congress the ability to pass constitutional protections that protected democracy and also protects dreamers from the impending doom that lawsuits threaten them.
Yeah, so I totally see essentially everything that you said. I guess the question is just essential question, if the order in itself was unconstitutional, as you say, and it would be shut down if it, I guess, continues as it has been and there's no reforms made. How though then, if it's unconstitutional and it was our executive orders, though, I feel like although, it's almost, you say it's Congress's job to do what President Obama did in that instance. The executive orders, though, and the legality of that process, even though they're sometimes looked down upon as the president overriding his power or, abusing his power as an executive figure, I think that there's a difference, though, between legality and, I guess, Congress using their power for a act that there's a difference between legality and the president acting how he should act as an executive figure. So there is the possibility as well, though, that even though it could be struck down and totally eliminated, there would still have to be a replacement in that case. So even if Trump hadn't made the action, taken the action to rescind the executive order, I think that there would still be a period of sort of deliberation in which a new order would have to be arrived at. And so I think, though, if Trump had just left the bill as is, it could have potentially delayed that. And I think the argument that it's, leave it up to Congress to do their job. I think that also, though, implies that Congress can work effectively. And as recent history has shown, it's almost difficult sometimes for Congress to pass things that they want passed or that they want done. And so what would happen then with what Trump did is, if there's no action taken with the actions that Trump took, the people who were beneficiaries under DACA are no longer beneficiaries, and they would then legally be obliged to leave the country. And so I feel like, although it might be it might not have been the best decision on Obama's part to bypass Congress, though in this case, Trump, by rescinding it unless Congress makes a decision, puts a lot or hinges a lot on Congress, essentially. And if Congress doesn't act, we are now left with 800,000 people who have grown up in this country who are forced to leave, and that would do a lot of damage in terms of jobs as well.
Mind if I ask a question real quick? And if you're not answering the question, you can just pass it back. So you said that you think Obama's policy might not have been the greatest and that had problems. Could you articulate what those problems are?
I guess by problems, I just meant that might have been the wrong word to use. I just meant that it's kind of difficult to put into words. But I guess I just meant that it might in terms of legal proceedings in general, I think that it's the best option, I guess, for a law to be passed the traditional way rather than an executive order. So that's what I meant. I didn't necessarily mean it was flawed. I just meant that, the ideal way to pass a law would be through Congress and through the House and et cetera. But in this case, I think when Obama made this decision. I don't think it was a bad decision. I just think that he ideally it would have gone through Congress so it was a more stable law so this wouldn't happen, because what is now happening is a result of Obama taking an executive order rather than passing it through the process. But I don't think it was a bad decision. I just think that that process would have made a more stable law that wouldn't be subject to Trump just rescinding it like just happened.
Okay, so that last argument you make is actually the very reason why I think people should vote for my side. Because you crystallized for me very clearly the problem with basing immigration policy on executive orders. And that is that executive orders are by nature weak, unstable, fragile, and subject to instantly being overturned at a presidential whim. Policy that is Congress is ingrained into actual law. It's difficult to overturn. Additionally, it actually is the way that our country is supposed to be run, and it is the best way to do things democratically. So executive orders, there's this law professor named Jonathan Turley, and he says that if the president can claim sweeping generalizations to make or suspend laws, then the entire legislative and democratic process is no more than just a pretense. And that's true, because at a mere presidential whim or a simple Supreme Court case, or another president overturning it, an executive order can be overturned. And so your argument here is, well, look, because Obama passed it through an executive order means that Trump can now overturn it instantly, is exactly why immigration policy should not be based on executive orders, but rather through law. And what is Trump trying to do? Trump, whether you like him or dislike him, and I personally, I don't really like him that much, Trump is trying to get Congress to pass laws, and he's putting the pressure on them by repealing this executive order and giving them a 6-month window to do so. So your own argument is an argument that I'm going to turn here, and I'm going to say supports my side. The fact that Trump can so easily rescind the executive order is the reason why we need Congress to do it. Because guess what? Any president now can instantly take away the rights of those 800,000 dreamers with one bill that's instantly passed. And if you keep Obama's in place, and you have somebody like Trump who doesn't want dreamers in the country, if he doesn't want dreamers in the country, then guess what? All it takes is I'm going to remove the order, and all of you have to get kicked out of the country. Instead, Trump is saying, Congress, you guys need to get your crap together, metaphorically speaking, and you need to pass a policy that's actually comprehensive, actually stable, and won't be overturned on a whim by either another president or by the Supreme Court. Look, there's two very simple worlds here. Your other argument is this. Your other argument is that we should leave it up to Congress. Or we shouldn't leave it up to Congress because they're ineffective. 3 responses to this. The first one, it's Congress's job. They should be doing it. The second one further is that Trump's 6-month thing actually puts pressure on them to do it. He expects it of them, and now they have a 6-month window where, in order to do their job, this puts both political pressure on them because the public wants them to do it, but it also puts pressure on them from the presidential administration. Additionally, though, as a hedge against that protection, Trump said that if they didn't do something about it, he would revisit it in 6 months and likely pass something as well, just because they couldn't get it done. So when you look at the two worlds, there's either a world where the states bring a lawsuit and it gets overturned and all of them deported instantly, or Trump's.
Oh, okay. So one thing though that I will bring up is the lawsuit that has been filed now and led by Democratic attorneys general from Washington, Massachusetts, and New York. And now I think Colorado also has joined those efforts. And they have essentially said that Trump's decision to end Daca violates the Administrative Procedure Act in addition to the Constitution's equal protection and due process clauses. So I guess then that his act not only not necessarily, overrode Congress, because I think your, statement then about Trump rescinding the act then, rescinding the act, although it's not, it's in response to an initial, executive order, he acted unilaterally as well in this case. And I think, Trump, by rescinding Daca, he now is acting without the majority of any, by just rescinding this of anybody. He just kind of did it and didn't necessarily think about what his people who he is supposed to be serving wanted, as a majority of people actually oppose his decision to rescind this program. But in terms of legality, it's not necessarily cut and dry, or not necessarily, black and white. what's right and what's wrong in terms of the legal side of things. I think that there are many things that could have happened because if Trump hadn't have rescinded this, this piece of legislature, then it would have just stayed in place as it is now. And so I think also the things you're saying as to the act eventually falling apart as a result of inability of Congress to decide on it, that's something to consider as well. But it's also a two-sided argument. It's not just Trump acting in a certain way. It's not just Obama acting in a certain way. It's also how Trump is now acting, and he's kind of doing the similar thing that Obama was doing. But in terms of the repercussions of this, if the act is ultimately passed, or if it fails to pass and Congress doesn't make a decision, and then Trump goes back on his word in terms of if in 6 months Congress hasn't made a decision, I'll make a decision. It's like, what is his decision then ultimately going to be, and are we then in the same problem that we started in? And I think too, it's just also important to consider the fact that Trump is not necessarily pro-immigration here. So he's saying, oh, we'll keep him in the country. But in terms of what he said and otherwise, where's the weight there? Like, what's going to make him follow through on that statement? And is he going to use this weight as a leverage for more immigration reform?
Okay, brief responses to two of the arguments you made in the last speech. The last argument you made there was Trump is hard on immigration reform and doesn't want the Dreamers to stay in the United States. My one response is, if that is the case, then why did he repeal it and give Congress 6 months to enact it? If he wanted them all deported, all he had to do was repeal it instantly and not give them a 6-month waiting period to pass something else, and they would have instantly been deported. The fact that he has said, you guys need to pass a policy, means that he's actually pro-Daca, at least in the sense of he thinks Dreamers should be staying. Additionally, the other argument you made is that Trump rescinding the executive order is the same as Obama passing the executive order. And this is just absolutely ridiculous. Trump unconstitutional act made by the previous president, executive power, is not a constitutional act just because it's executive. My argument is not that all executive orders are bad. My argument is that this specific executive order is bad, and that the 20 Harvard and legal experts did a study on this one all agreed that it was unconstitutional. It's very clearly unconstitutional because the text of the Constitution doesn't delegate the powers of legislature to the president. It delegates it to the legislature, which is namely Congress. So you haven't touched my argument about constitutionality. You haven't made any responses to the 20 legal scholars from Harvard and Columbia University who all say it's unconstitutional and will get overturned. The fact of the matter is, if you defend Daca, you undermine the democratic process and you undermine the Constitution, which is supposed to be important in this country at least. The second argument, the next argument I want to go to, is the notion of the states suing. Additionally, you don't address or offer any substantive response to the notion that the Supreme Court is going to overturn it. And states right now have threatened, 13 of them have threatened to sue Trump if he didn't do something about it. So Trump is doing this in response to 13 states who have said, we will take this to the Supreme Court and we will win. And then guess what will happen? Daca will get overturned and all of the Dreamers will be deported. You keep hashing out this argument that says we need to protect the Dreamers because they have their livelihoods here, and and they grow up here and they shouldn't suffer from their parents' mistakes. The reality is, if you side with your side of the resolution, they are the ones that get screwed in the long run. Because guess what? Your own argument proves it when you say that Trump can just instantly rescind the executive order. Executive orders are not a stable ground for constructing policy, especially immigration reform, nor are they the constitutional ground. There's two worlds here. There's a world where DACA is kept, and then the states sue, and then the Supreme Court overturns it, and then boom, instantly all of the Dreamers get deported. And then there's a world where Trump says, I'm going to overturn it and put political pressure on Congress to actually do their job, and if not, I'll revisit it. And that world is far superior in the long term because it allows for us to create a stable policy where Dreamers can actually have legal protections rather than fickle protections that are unconstitutional and established in the short term.
Yeah, I guess there's a third world, though, that wasn't touched on. There's the case in which it is not ruled unconstitutional and it just remains how it was. And I think that you say if Trump was to just, or if anyone else was to just say they wanted to rescind it, they could, and all would be deported. Yes, there'd also be mass outrage and probably, I would say, dangerous riots and protests, which I think is almost like at that point, it would happen, but that would just be something that I think any rational person would want to avoid at all costs. So you kind of have to use other means in order to do so. And one thing that I was touching on before that I didn't necessarily finish talking about was the possibility that Trump uses this as leverage to pass other immigration reforms. And I think a lot of people are saying that Trump, is not, like you kind of said, doesn't really have any intention to deport all these people. But he wants to use the program or the threat of not having this program anymore to enact different immigration reforms. And in terms of the unconstitutionality of what you said, I don't think it's definitively unconstitutional. I think that there are sources on two sides there are two sides to this. You are citing 20 Harvard professors. There's a number of other, there's plenty of other people out there, including the mentioned the governors that are now threatening to file a lawsuit or suing him for doing this. And those educated people are on the other side of things. So I think that the unconstitutionality of it is not definitive in terms of, the fact that the executive order is not unconstitutional. It's sometimes frowned upon, but it's not illegal. It's totally something that is viable in terms of its result. Like you said, it could be overturned just like that, but that's granted there's a leader that would be willing to do that without risking the, mass chaos that would ensue if that decision was made. So I feel like there's, although like the unconstitutionality of it, is something that could be argued for, I think the other side is also, that it is constitutional, or the act in itself, Obama's executive order, was constitutional. And I think that when Congress, as it is in this case, or it was in his case, was unable to do anything, was ineffective, that's why we have the executive order, is so there can be actions taken when Congress is stuck in a stalemate or unable to act. The executive order exists so things can be done to better the country in the long run. And it doesn't necessarily mean it's unconstitutional, even if it's frowned upon.
Okay, thank you. So you've responded to the constitutional argument, and your argument is basically, well, we're not really sure if it's unconstitutional, and there are some governors in some states who are suing Trump because he just rescinded the policy. There's a couple different things to note here. The first thing is that it is definitively unconstitutional, because the study that I gave you from 20 Harvard law students and Columbia University study that said it is unconstitutional for the same reasons that Obama's other executive order, Daca, was also unconstitutional. It has the exact same element that Daca did, which the Supreme Court literally struck down. So you're always going to prefer my empirical precedent and my Harvard law researchers over my opponent. Well, we're not really sure if it's unconstitutional. Additionally, the argument that the other governors are suing because Trump has rescinded it, specifically their lawsuit is not a claim about the constitutionality of the policy. Their lawsuit is a claim against discrimination against illegal immigrants. So the fact that other people are suing it doesn't affect the issue of whether or not it's constitutional. They're saying it's a discrimination issue. Okay, this debate is not, are we pro-immigration, are we pro-dreamer, or are we anti-dreamer? I've established from the beginning, I absolutely support the rights of children of illegal immigrants to be able to be American citizens and stay in the United States. The question becomes, what protects dreamers more? Unconstitutional executive orders or actual congressional laws? And this debate should not even be a question mark. There shouldn't even be a question mark in your mind. The fact that Trump can so easily rescind it, and the fact that the Supreme Court was going to overturn it based on the lawsuits and based on the empirical precedent, means that Trump had to do something if the dreamers wanted to, in fact, be protected. And the argument that, oh, well, he shouldn't have overturned it because we wanted to protect them is ridiculous when you look at whether it actually does protect them or not. Additionally, the argument that you made earlier about how, Congress won't actually do it. This is actually funny. From just an hour ago, Nancy Pelosi and Chuck Schumer just had a meeting at the White House with Trump that they said was really incredibly productive, specifically about Daca and proposals that Trump has said he would support that would protect dreamers' rights within Congress. So this notion that Congress isn't going to do something is a poor one. And the fact that Trump has made strides with Democrats and with Republicans about getting plans that all three, that the Democrats, Republicans, and Trump would all be on board with that protect streamers' rights is proof of my side. Here's the reality. An executive order is both unconstitutional and illegal, and it's unstable and fragile. You have not done an adequate job of disproving those 2 points. You haven't given me any reasons for why it's constitutional when you haven't rebutted my analysis on why it is unconstitutional. And you haven't offered me any reasons for why the executive order is a more stable building block for protecting dreamers than congressional law is actually. Trump, whether you like him or not, has placed the ball in Congress's court, is making strides to help Congress protect dreamers so that they can't just be rescinded on a mere whim from another president or from the Supreme Court.
Yeah. So, okay. I'm going to continue, but for 2 seconds, I'm going to say also that I am in the first week of a job and I am exhausted, and I just finished a 3-hour interview. So I apologize for not being a better debater at this moment. And that's probably considering for a lot of this. So I'm just going to establish that. But yes, anyway, so to address some of the things that you said, or to try to, I think that, though the executive order, again, is unstable, I think that this is kind of just a basic thing, but I don't think it would have lasted as long as it has if it was unconstitutional. I feel like the executive order in itself, if it was unconstitutional, would have been eliminated far, like a long time ago, just considering, that. But I don't think it's unconstitutional. But in terms of whether it's stable, I don't think it's stable. That's not any argument that I made is that the executive order is stable. But I think that it's an effective means of accomplishing things, just if only to make a statement in the short term. And you say that all these people can be deported, but I think deportations is a complicated issue. Like, you can't just deport people. Like, there's a process that would have to be followed in order for people to be deported. And so in that case, when there's this process is followed, it's just not that easy to deport mass amounts of people. So it wouldn't just be deported all at once. And I think that's like just something to say too. But also I think that it doesn't change the fact that the DACA's benefits that were enabled by the act are firmly within the executive branch's authority. There was nothing that was guaranteed by the act that was unconstitutional or outside of the president's authority.
Okay, nice speech, and it's totally all good. I understand if you're tired. It happens. I've debated from tired too. It's all good. Okay, so in the final speech, I just want to wrap up a couple of issues. There's really 2 sides in this debate round, and the people who are judging have 2 different options. You can say that Trump should have kept Daca against the impending lawsuits from the states that claim it's unconstitutional, and the empirical precedent that says it is unconstitutional based on how the courts have ruled and based on how the legal scholars have said it's unconstitutional. Or you can side with Trump, who has working with the Democrats and Republicans simultaneously to pass a long-term congressional policy that actually protects them and isn't subject to a mere presidential whim or a Supreme Court case. And those are the only 2 worlds that exist in this debate round. Let's look at the individual arguments. So the first argument is whether or not it's actually constitutional. There's a couple different notes here. The first thing is that Obama, on multiple different occasions himself, declared that it was unconstitutional, and he said that he couldn't just bypass Congress and change immigration law himself. That's not how a democracy works. So he himself admitted it's an abuse of his power and it's unconstitutional. Additionally, his second DACA, which was the subject of lawsuits brought on by states, was overturned because it was unconstitutional. And the same reasons for why it was unconstitutional would apply to DACA as well, as the legal scholars from Harvard and Columbia University have articulated. So it's unconstitutional based on what the legal experts say and based on how the court has in fact ruled, as well as based on the opinion of the president who passed it himself. Then there's the second issue. Which policy is better for dreamers? Now, I'm going to articulate, and my claim is going to be that a congressional policy is going to be superior for a couple reasons. The first reason is that it's actually a long-term policy. Executive orders are inherently short-term policies that are designed to basically, if something can't happen in a short term, this is like an easy fix. And so it's going to be more stable because it's going to be because it's supposed to be long-term and supposed to actually be stable. Secondarily, the executive order can be overturned by a president or Supreme Court at any point in time. Specifically, this one is under threat of being overturned by the Supreme Court it would have been if Trump hadn't changed it, because the states said that they were going to bring lawsuits forward, and based on the empirical precedent that the Supreme Court has set and the analysis by the Harvard scholars, it probably would have been overturned. At which case, no more protection for the dreamers. All the kids are going to now be punished for the mistakes that their parents made. And so this debate should not be about whether you like immigrants or dislike immigrants, or whether you like Trump or dislike Trump. The debate comes down to this: do you think the executive order is constitutional and a better protection, or do you think a congressional law is? And I think it is.